kick things off. So thank you to everybody who has joined us today for the boost. In case you don't know who I am, my name is Lisa Maynard Atem. I am the Managing Director of the Black United Representation Network, and we run the boost. It's a weekly kind of midweek motivational hour where we talk to somebody very inspirational, various people from various different backgrounds. Today we have the fantastic Anton. I'm not going to say too much about him. I'm going to let him talk about himself. So firstly, I would like to welcome Anton to the boost today and kick off with my first question is, tell us about the early years of Anton, where it all started.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, first of all, thanks for having me, and quite a big build up there, Lisa. I hope I fulfill it, you know, meeting somebody inspirational, but I suppose you tend not to think of it that way, but there's definitely been some tough obstacles along the way to the person I am today. It all started when, I suppose, in my childhood, really, because a lot of my career is shaped around the experiences and the people and the community that I grew up around. So I grew up in Moss Side, Manchester. Obviously, the area needs no introduction. It never does. It's funny, you know, wherever I go in the world, I say, honestly, and we're talking as far as Tanzania, and I'll get onto that later. And I said I was from Moss Side, and they were like, ooh. I was like, oh my gosh, like, how is that even possible? Like, how do you know? So, yeah, I mean, I grew up in Moss Side in the 90s, you know, around all of the issues that the community faced at that time. And, you know, a lot of my peers who were like brothers to me, really, it was an interesting one because we kind of grew up in a very kind of insulated bubble of childhood play. And a lot of my memories from my childhood are really around kind of, you know, playing football from dusk until dawn, and running at like the local field, that being just an amazing adventure playground, and lots of camaraderie and kind of friendship. And unfortunately, that was probably as good as it got, really, because as we began, you know, we're talking from the ages of 4 till 10, as we got older, I started to see a real transition and a change in people's, what I didn't know then, but I do know now, is mental health. You know, the response to school. You're talking about lots of bright people who did really well in year 6, and then by year 11, and by sort of even year 7, to be honest, by the end of year 7, that transition from going from primary school to secondary school, just a huge change in behavior, gang involvement, crime, lack of self-esteem, aggression. It actually turns out that of the 4 of my closest friends growing up, literally, I'm the only one that's not been to jail, or isn't currently in jail. So that for me was always something I never quite understood. I was very much as as I was an outgoing person, I was also very kind of, I've always erred towards the side of peace and kind of de-escalation, as sort of a person. And that really kind of underpinned my schooling years. So I started to become a lot more kind of, a lot more introverted, a lot more focused on my own interests, and that ended up making me move away from the people who were like brothers to me for a long time, in those sort of formative years as a teenager. And it also made me quite the observer as well. So I'd always ask myself the question, like, what is going on? Like, I know these people very, very well, and I don't understand why they're making these choices. And that question of why kind of really informed the majority of my early adult life. Also growing up in a single parent family in my side, and kind of the understanding of growing up in my side, where it was a majority Black Caribbean area at the time. There was an influx of Somalian migrants over sort of a period of time, but for a long period of time, it was literally just Black Caribbean. I'm actually mixed heritage, but my father's Nigerian. So the kind of understanding the differences there and the nuances between cultures and everything. So a lot of that kind of, that was like a rich tapestry of questions and information and stuff I really wanted to figure out in life. And then when I got the real fortunate opportunity to go and change schools. So my first two school years were at high school in inner city Manchester. My second, or the rest of my education, was in Knutsford, Cheshire. So I actually moved out. It was a bit like, you know, it was as close to the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air as you're going to get in Manchester, in terms of kind of, you know, the boy from the hood going out to leafy Cheshire, and seeing how the other half lived, essentially. And that was, again, a massive eye-opener, because it was even more juxtaposition against what was going on at home with close friends and family, and then what was going on at school. And, you know, we're talking 16-year-olds driving Range Rovers. It's like, what's going on? Like, it was a lot to kind of ignite my curiosity around the way society is built. So it's probably no surprise that I then studied sociology and psychology, media studies and English language. So I basically, without realizing it, intuitively wanted to figure out about society. It wasn't kind of an intention at that time. It was just kind of what my interests were. But I was finding out a lot about society, and sociology, I really took to it. The crime and deviance modules, the description of the way society is structured and the way society is set up, really opened my eyes to a lot of the reasons, the structural and systematic reasons why certain people find themselves walking down one path and others find themselves going down completely different paths. You know, they go as far in sociology to talk about things like concentric zones, which is literally the path that you take to work or school has an impact on the people that you come into contact with, and therefore your behavior, resulting behavior. Broken windows theory, all of the stuff that I really picked up then. And I was like a sponge then, and I decided to really kind of dig deep into it. I'd say that was probably, that's where it all began for me, you know. To answer your question, it really was kind of it was a organic process of just discovering and observing what was going on around me, and also what was going on in family and at home and that side of things, and really just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, no, I think I see what you're saying with regards to like the whole education piece when you change schools, because as you know, I was born here, but I left this country when I was 1. I didn't come back till I was nearly 10, and in that time we lived in various countries in the world. I went to different schools, international schools, and I do think it definitely, like you, it definitely gave me a very unique perspective on the world. You know, I saw how different people live, not just in this country, but in other countries around the world. So I do think that has probably played a massive part in influencing me as an adult. So yeah, I totally get where you're coming from that point of view. I think it's definitely really interesting. Yeah, and I often think when I talk to my friends about it, I wish that more of them got to experience things in that way, because I think it just helps to give you a more rounded view, and just that people are approaching things from different perspectives and different points of view, different from a financial perspective, a social perspective. There are just so many factors that come into play. So no, I think that's really interesting. But going on to our next question. So tell us about your journey to becoming a teacher and how you've used that experience to build your business.
Wow. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, my first thought to teaching actually came when I did a sabbatical summer. So I went in my second year of university. So first of all, I chose to study sociology and criminology. Surprise, surprise, after everything I just said then, at university. And in between my second and third year, I was really trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I knew that kind of travel was a big part of that. But I also didn't want to kind of waste years just kind of traveling and enjoying myself. I wanted to kind of build it into a career. So before I decided to teach, I was actually doing youth work. So I was working for a charity called Corrie Arts in London, that my dad was a big part of, and his partner was actually the director. And they'd arranged for youths aged between the age of 14 to 17 from an area called Wood Green in London, which is basically just like next to Tottenham, so similar demographic to my side, to actually go out to Tanzania in Africa and mentor a load of young people over there of a similar age. So the idea was that we were going to take the kids from London and they were going to go and mentor the kids from Africa, from Tanzania, specifically Zanzibar. And I was a lead mentor in that. So I was supposed to mentor the mentors who were mentoring the kids from Africa. And it was absolutely hilarious because it really didn't work out that way at all. Basically, I was mentored by the kids from Zanzibar, and the kids from London were also mentored by the kids from Zanzibar, because there was just so many crazy experiences. The one that really stands out to me, well, there's two actually. The first one, which was amazing, was that basically the kids from London and the kids from Zanzibar had to come up with a production. They'd never done performing arts before. They had to come up with a production and perform it on the stage of the Zanzibar International Film Festival. So like, that's actually a really kind of niche festival where people from all over the world come to it, all over Africa come to it. And it was an amazing experience. And the production that happened, in Corrie Arts are a production company as well, and their tagline is youth empowering youth. So basically they had loads of experts managing the production, and the youths, that like what they produced was absolutely phenomenal. And just talking about the hair stand on the back of my neck, I'm just gutted that we didn't record it, honestly. You could just imagine kind of these children who had never done performing arts on a stage, on an international stage, really expressing themselves, and it was such a beautiful experience. But the second most impactful experience, which really kind of pushed me along the line of getting my act together and deciding what I wanted to do as a career, was when I was working with I was doing some youth work. So we went up to the base of Kenya, which is a village called Arusha, which is literally just underneath Kilimanjaro. Beautiful scenery, and you've got this village, which is an orphanage, and it's a missionary village called St. Catherine's, and they teach English to young children from the local area. And I was doing some tuition, so I was going around working with these kids, and we were talking about kids that were no older than 9 years old, right? So I get talking to this one boy, and I see this piece of work that he's doing is brilliant. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And I say to him kind of the stereotypical thing, what is it you want to be when you're older? You know, I was 20 years old. It was the best I could muster up. You know, it's ridiculous. Right? And he says to me, he says, I want to go to England. And I just, when he said that to me, I was just like, okay. So it was a complete game changer for me, because what he was telling me is he's going to work his entire educational life to get to a place that I was born in. And for the past 19, 20 years and doing all my sociology and left-wing stuff, I'd essentially been critiquing the level of opportunity that I was given based on my platform, because, you know, being a single parent, young mixed heritage man from my side, I was looking at myself as a kind of, as though I had less, when really the privilege that I had with the opportunity around me, because this young person who is very bright, equally as bright, more diligent than I was at that age, is saying that they're going to work hard just to get to where I was born. So that just completely shifted my viewpoint on privilege, and it really kind of kicked me into gear. I was like, you know what? I need to get off my soapbox, and I need to start actually doing things to make a difference. And that's what pushed me into teaching. So I qualified. I was really fortunate enough to get through a tough cohort on the PGCE. I taught psychology and social sciences, and I went and taught in Bradford for a year. And while I was teaching out there, I was working with the communities, the South Asian community and the Caucasian community. For some reason, they just thought I'd be the perfect person to bridge that gap. Learned loads of stuff around the structure of education, how to communicate information in a way that people would receive it and understand it, how to plan for the communication of information, and how to deliver kind of A-level standard teaching and GCSE teaching in sciences and social sciences. So I learned loads of stuff there. What that taught me in terms of life and business was transferable skills are huge. And it's our responsibility as professionals to really do a triage of our own skill set and think creatively about how we can apply that to the goals that we want to achieve. I did a year in teaching and it wasn't for me. It wasn't for me because I felt as though I was having less of an impact on children than when I was a youth worker, which baffled me, to be honest. You know, I was teaching kids how to get through exams, but I wasn't able to do that extra bit around the pastoral because I just didn't have time as an NQT. And I decided also that, you know, I didn't want to spend the next 10 years doing the same thing over and over and over again. I wanted to invest in my own personal journey as much as I wanted to help others. So I made a deal with myself after a year of teaching, and I said in it was a 10-year plan. I've got a 10-year plan that will be, I'll be running my own businesses in education. It'll either be a school or it will be my own business, but I need to understand business first. So I had a look at jobs that were available, and I went to a graduate day at Pareto Law. Funnily enough, we were just talking about this morning. I went to a graduate day at Pareto Law where a load of businesses came in to kind of look at people in dodgy suits, really, and kind of talking about how good they are before they've even done anything with themselves. And I was able to do that very well. And I was offered an amazing opportunity to work at Virgin Media Business as an account manager. And it was mind-blowing for me because I was on an NQT salary. I'd just left teaching. Everything was up in the air. I'd just met who is now my wife, and she had a daughter already. So we were kind of settling down as a family, and I'd quit my job. And I was a bit like what's coming next? I put myself out there and went to this graduate day, and I was offered double the salary that I was on previously to sell internet. And that really kind of, that to me was just like a complete departure. So I've been working really hard. I've got a really good skill set in teaching, and I've been working 12-hour days and planning lessons and all of these things. But somebody's willing to pay me double the money for half the time. And that really got me thinking. And my viewpoint was always, the way I viewed it was I was going into the belly of the beast to learn the tricks, and I was going to come and use those skills for good. That was how I was justifying leaving teaching to go and sell internet for more money. So I did that, and I took to sales like a duck to water. But what I discovered in that role was that sales is a process. It's not just how charming can you be. There's actually a whole systematic process that you can follow that will increase your performance and your output as a salesperson or as a business. Regardless of kind of your personality, there's literally things that you can do systematically to increase business output. And that was really intriguing to me, because I thought, well, if you can do sales, you know, then, and you can increase business, then you can do business. So that was massively interesting to me. And I loved learning about business development, and I loved dealing with all of those blue chip customers and signing huge deals. And the highlight of that whole 2-year period that I was at Virgin Media Business was spending my 25th birthday at the O2 Arena watching Jay-Z from a director's box, because I'd won one of the competitions. And I was like, oh, I could really do with more of this. They paid for the hotel, everything, and all I'd done is hit targets. Like, anyway, but, you know, I really valued that, and I really liked that side of things. However, there was a massive gap missing in my soul, because I wasn't doing what I'm passionate about, which is working with children and young people. So business is definitely a passion of mine, but it's definitely a second love. My first love is working with children and young people, and I wanted to get back into it. So with my 10-year plan in mind, I'm now 2 years into it. I did something else that was crazy. I quit my job where, because of the commission, I was earning like 50 grand a year at the age of 25. And I was like, nope, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to go into education recruitment. Now, because I was going into an industry that I'd not sold into before, I was basically saying, right, well, I can teach and I can sell. Education recruitment makes sense. So I went into education recruitment as a trainee, which meant I was then being paid less than what I was being paid as a teacher. and I had to get a second job at a bar while I was doing the transition because, you know, lifestyle inflation and all of that you talk about. So yeah, that was a massive learning curve for me because I was kind of, that was the first time where I think I truly experienced what it was like in a startup environment. Because basically education recruitment is, you come in, you pick up the phone, you develop contacts. If you develop the contacts, great. If you don't develop the contacts, goodbye. And it's really cutthroat. And I was fortunate, I talked myself up in the interview, like, I'll come in and I'll do this and I'll do that. And they said, right, okay, well, if you can do literally half of what you've just said, we'll promote you to manager in 8 months. So I was, sorry, let me just plug my computer so it doesn't go off, right? Yeah. So I committed to that and I came in, and after 8 months, I hit the target. So it was supposed to be 12 months. I did it in 8 months, and they gave me a management position. And that's really where everything I'm doing today kind of took root, because in that role, I was special educational needs branch manager. And what I did was I combined my teaching and working with vulnerable and hard to reach communities with my sales experience. So I actually went out to schools and did work in the classroom. So I went to Salford and worked in the Peruga, went to Manchester and worked in it, and I just got as much experience as I possibly could. Now, bearing in mind, in the back of my mind, I was actually thinking about the long game. So I was thinking, I want to figure out as much about the education industry as possible, so I'm completely plugged in when it comes to doing what my long-term goal is. Anyway, that went really well. I made some brilliant connections, and I did some brilliant work with children, young people. Kind of 2 years later, I've got a fully developed branch. It's my first management position. I've got a team. We're doing some great work in schools, and we're recruiting teachers and finding them jobs, which was, you know, again, that's sort of my third passion that I found is getting people work and getting people into employment, because it transforms people's lives. You know, I was able to get my mum a job when she was hit hard. She'd never really recovered because she was a youth worker. I was able to get, and in 2010 they cut the youth services, so I was able to get her a job in a school, which made a huge difference to her life. And you know, I was really happy where I was, but you know, I wanted more, because I had this ambition, and I was really fortunate to develop a relationship with the head of Trafford Pupil Referral Service, who basically introduced me to what was new at the time, which is virtual schools, basically local authorities that looked after children, so children who were in care, yeah, or children who have experience of care at some stage. And she said that there was a staff shortage and that there was a load of kids that needed support. And I said, well, I'm literally getting calls from staff every single day saying there's a job shortage, and they're skilled staff that are good at working with children in special educational needs settings and social emotional mental health. Put the two together. I basically sent some teaching assistants out to work with those kids instead of sending teachers out, because my thinking was, well, they're going to be better at engaging the kids, because that was one of the biggest problems. Tutors didn't know how to engage. So anyway, teaching assistants went out. Of the 14 kids that we tried it out with, 80% of them engaged. And I was just like, wow, what is this? I've not put any planning into it. I've literally just sent teaching assistants out, got a venue for them, and let them be the professionals, and it's working like clockwork. I went back to my employees at the time, Vision for Education. They said no, basically. They said, let's do it in a couple of years. We'll do this properly in a couple of years. And as a 27-year-old, highly ambitious, impatient person, I said, right, well, I'll do it myself. Crazy. So I quit my job again and decided to launch what was Gain Focus Limited. And that was my very first experience of running a social enterprise and private entity as well, that was targeting support and intervention for vulnerable students who couldn't access education. And that's really how it all happened. Sorry, I gave you a very detailed answer there, didn't I?
No, that's great. That's great, Anton. So, in a recent interview for our newsletter on The Level, you talked about how you were inspired to be a part of creating opportunities for Black professionals and business owners. Can you tell us a little bit more about your motivation and what you're doing around that?
Sure. So, fast forward to sort of now. I mean, I launched Game Focus in 2016. And there were many highs and probably double the amount of lows and learning experiences, as I like to call them now, through the journey of being a solo entrepreneur. What I discovered was that there are huge, as I pointed out before when I had that conversation with the boy in Zanzibar, there were huge opportunities in the UK for professionals, and there is definitely progress and more equity and parity in the workplace than there ever has been in the UK. However, there were some very, very clear, subtle barriers to professionals in accessing the sort of careers that people dream of and would motivate people to really kind of push themselves to achieve. And not everybody's got their own skill set. You know, communication's always been a good skill set of mine. Not everybody has that skill set, and it shouldn't take sort of the loudest person in the room to overcome some of those more subtle barriers. It would be fantastic if we could get to a point of meritocracy where the people with the best skills are the people that get the opportunity, not the people with the best network or not the people with the best way of selling themselves. You know, it would be amazing if we could get to a point in society, and I do think it's achievable, and I think the will is there for everybody to have an opportunity to gain employment that is equal to their skill set, regardless of their background, whether that's colour, gender, and socioeconomic background as well, social capital, all of those things. It'd be great if we could get to that space, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. It's something that I've had to kind of, in my own career, I've had to kind of bulldoze my way through. You know, going into Virgin Media Business as the only person of colour on the floor for a large proportion of time. I'm talking sort of a staff force of 200 salespeople. How that's mind-blowing, really. And dealing with some of the common misconceptions around my accent and my interests, and kind of having to skillfully, if I don't say so myself, navigate all of that without it having an impact on my self-esteem. That in itself was a whole thing, you know. And I know, Lisa, you've got experience of this, doing what you did at Halfords. You know, oh my God, I did it again. Oh my God. Yeah, basically Lisa just used to sell bikes for a living. That's basically it. No, Harrods, slightly more prestigious. But you know, who's judging? Sorry about that. But yeah, you know, doing what you did at Harrods, you know, you no doubt would have come across some of the similar kind of subtle barriers. And yeah, it's for me now, in the position that I'm in as a managing director of my own organization that's got a lot of financial backing, I feel very, very passionate about being part of the change and demonstrating to people that, one, on the side of the people who are what I would go as far as saying victims of the current structure and the current barriers to progress, that it is possible to break through even amongst those barriers. But then also to people who perhaps are unaware of those barriers purely innocently, because, you know, you don't know what you don't know and you don't know what you've not experienced in many cases. For those to hear from a voice of somebody who isn't complaining necessarily, but is identifying that these barriers are absolutely there, hopefully to shed some light on what that feels like as a professional, and seeing if we can come together to kind of make change.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So before I go on to open it to questions from our audience, what's next for you? What's next for Anton?
What's next for Anton? Well, so my 10-year plan was achieved in terms of developing my own business and education. And to be honest, that in itself has been a massive reflective process for me. So I think I've just come to the end. I've been doing it now for the past 5 years. Been doing it now for the past 5 years. And I'm now at a stage where I successfully saw investment in the project that we were delivering. And we've been backed by a hedge fund to launch kind of a dual business, which is on one side, we're doing education recruitment, which is everything I spoke about before, teachers in schools. And on the other side, we're doing the vulnerable children. So we're working with vulnerable children and helping them to access education, which honestly fills me with joy every day. What is next for Anton is increasing the reach of the services that we offer across the country. That's what we want to achieve as an organization. We want to be able to demonstrate that if you invest in children and young people, amazing things happen. And we also want to demonstrate that if you invest in yourself, you can create amazing things. So that for me is what I want to achieve over the next 10 years. I've not put myself kind of, well, obviously on the business side, I have, you've got all the KPIs and all of that side of things. But from a personal point of view and from my career, I want to continue doing what I'm doing now and get better at it and have a much wider reach of impact in terms of the services that we offer and what I do working with children.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, I'm sure you're going to be very successful. So I don't have any worries about that. We have a question from Danny, and he says, as a sales manager, he once worked with someone who came across as quite a hard nut, who took the opportunity to put down colleagues and big up himself. But then he wrote a really sensitive piece for the staff magazine explaining that he and the rest of the sales team were the way they were because they experienced. Oh, sorry, Danny wasn't the sales manager. He worked with a sales manager, but he wrote this piece and was basically in that piece saying that they were the way they were because they had to live with rejection day after day. Was he just making an excuse?
Brilliant question, Danny. The short answer to that question is no. But there is a nuance to it. I think that, they definitely, salespeople, the old school of sales is that you're going to receive, if you make 100 calls, you're going to receive 99 no's. And the only way to get past that is to smash your way through it. Now, in my experience and my understanding, there are many ways to get to the objective of receiving a yes. And it's a bit like the story of the cloud. Sorry, I've got young children. The story of the cloud and the sun. Yeah, so, the cloud is trying to blow the coat off the poor lady who's just trying to do a garden, and the sun is basically warming her so she doesn't need to wear the coat. If you were to compare salespeople, I'm definitely more of the sun than I am of the cloud. However, the cloud is necessary in the ecosystem, and I think you've got to find the right balance. What I found with salespeople who are very brash, direct, and don't consider any form of empathy in the workplace is that they're poorly trained. They've got a misconception about what's necessary to reach their objectives, and actually everybody can win. And that's a philosophy that I've always kind of adhered to, which is everybody can win. I do have a lot of sympathy for people who haven't been given the tools to demonstrate the emotional intelligence that's required in order to deal with the pressures of hitting target or you're sacked, and not allow that to spill over into the wider parts of the business. And salespeople are often very misunderstood as a result of that, because you can imagine for a lot of people that they're basically in fight or flight all the time, and they don't know how to manage that internally, and it just spews out in ridiculous comments, often, you know, really inappropriate reliance on nights out and kind of all of the things that come with it. And the culture can get very, very toxic. It can be the epitome of toxic masculinity and that kind of culture. And, you know, it's not just men, it's women as well that find themselves wrapped up in that. Yeah, the short answer to the question is it just an excuse? No, I think it's a genuine reason. They genuinely go into work thinking they're at war. But it's definitely something that can be remedied 100% with the right training and management. I think it's a management problem, first and foremost, and it needs to come from the top down. It's an organizational issue.
Thank you.
Okay,
no
great.
Worries, Danny. Thanks for your question.
Got a question from Donna saying, can you offer any advice or tips on successful bidding for funding?
So I've been very, very fortunate to develop quite a strong network in spot purchase funding. So so if you want advice on how to create a successful bid, or you want advice on anything, if you want advice on how to market your company, or go to an expert first. This is one thing I learned in business straight away, was rather than always trying to upskill yourself, there are people that are already doing it that are willing to come and help. It may cost money, you may have to give a percentage of whatever the bid is, but there are people that can greatly increase the likelihood of success with little to no time invested by yourself, because you've gone to them and you commission them into your organization. So the short answer to that question is, my advice would be contact Burn, because Burn have a wonderful network of bid writers, people who understand the commissioning process and the bid writing process, and go to a workshop for your own development and education. But then also, if time is of the essence, outsource it. Honestly, if you're running a business, you need to get funding, outsource it, and don't feel ashamed of doing so. So in terms of practical advice, that would be it. My own journey was, I was already a salesperson, so I already had connections with decision-making commissioners, and I increased my contact network. So I would give that advice to somebody who's comfortable with sales and is willing to go out and develop that contact network. That's not for everybody. You might be delivering an amazing service. I don't know what it is that you do, Donna, but you might be delivering an amazing service that's absolutely needed, and that part of your business needs all of your time. So in that respect, don't stop doing that, but don't ignore the elephant in the room, which is, how do you get funds into the business? Go to somebody who can do it for you. And that's one of the things that kind of goes back to what I was saying before about, why do I want to see not just Black professionals, but small to medium enterprise owners gain access to wider networks? It's for things like that, because cash flow is huge. So yeah, my advice would be, talk to an expert. If I was going to direct you to anybody, it would be literally after this call, have a chat with Lisa about the people within the Burn network who might be able to help with that. And also look at seminars, which again is something that we do at Burn, to upskill yourself.
Great. I hope that was okay for you, Donna.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
No worries, Donna.
Okay, has anyone else got any questions that they'd like to ask? Because we've still got a bit of time. We've got about 10 minutes. So if anybody's got a question that they would like to ask, you can put it in the chat, or you can say it via video if you want to.
I'll ask a question, Anton, if it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
We didn't really touch on some of the things I know about you, so that's my fault because I looked at the questions. But from a mental health perspective, can you just maybe give us a little overview of what you've done from a mental health perspective? Because I think more so over the last 12 months that has become, you know, even at the forefront of everybody's kind of radar.
Yeah.
And I think dealing with the pandemic and how that has eradicated a lot of the social aspects of our lives. So yeah, if you could just maybe tell us a little bit about what you've done. And
definitely. So yeah, it's a really good question, because it is a large part of what I do, to be honest, around mental health. So our RISE project, which is, so my company is Holden Education, and we work with vulnerable children, but obviously vulnerable children have families. And what we found is over the course of the pandemic, those who were already struggling to access sort of structured livelihoods and work and education and that side of things have been hit the hardest on lots of different levels. So the top level, it's socioeconomic, so money, and then secondly, it's socially as well, because people have become more detached from their networks. So what we found is, working with the vulnerable children, is that the families are equally in dire straits. So parents, grandparents, and friendship networks, people have been really hard hit by restricted access to each other and all of the things that we've all had to struggle with and deal with, but then coupled with extreme poverty. So the work that we've been trying to help and things that we've been trying to deliver to kind of support a remedy to that is group-based gatherings online with families, but also activity days. So basically social distance activity days. Over the summer, what we did was we got fathers and sons together where we could, to engage in a structured health and well-being activity, and lots of other things. But I think one of the key takeaways from all of the stuff that we've done has been that no matter where you are in society or in your career, and this is from a personal perspective as well, you know, the one thing that's guaranteed, and I think, you know, we were talking to Danny about the difficult day that he's had today before. One thing that's guaranteed is life is going to throw something that is less than pleasurable for us to deal with. And the way that we deal with that is often dictated by what our current mental health and mental state is at that moment in time. So what I've tried to do with myself and what I've tried to do with the people that I work with is support them with strategies to ensure that regardless of what's going on out there, there is always an internal routine that we have to support our own mental health. My own personal routine is yoga, football, and kind of learning. I like to learn new skills. I learned to juggle. I don't know, I really enjoyed it as well. But anyway, you know, that's completely irrelevant. But just learning new skills and feeling positive about your routine and structure and feeling like you've been productive in the day has a huge impact on your overall mental well-being. And then that has a knock-on effect on the way that we deal with very difficult circumstances that arise in life. Definitely had my fair share of those over the last couple of years. And I know we all have as a community. There's one good thing about the pandemic, and you know, I'd much rather us never have had the pandemic. But you know, one thing that has come out of it that has been positive is I think everybody's got a shared feeling of experience. Everyone's got a shared experience now. We've all had to change our lives, and as a result, I think it's put shed a light on mental health in a big way, and hopefully that will have a catalyst to kind of activity around mental health and increasing what we see around mental health as well.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because I think for me, you know, just from a mental health point of view, it's made me, the last 12 months has made me really think about my own mental health a lot, because it's that thing of, if you're physically sick, you will go to the doctor. you wouldn't hesitate to do that. But I think with mental health, I think for so long we've been kind of programmed to think, oh, it's something that's buried under the carpet, it's not something that you talk about. And I think with what's happened over the last 13-14 months, you haven't been able to hide from it, because what's happened has had such a massive impact on the mental health of pretty much everyone. And I think, you know, like you said, Anton, I would have rather the pandemic didn't happen, but I think one of the good things that's come out of it is really put mental health in the spotlight in a good way. You know, there's nothing wrong with, it's okay to not be okay. And I think that's a message that we need to communicate as often as possible. You know, it's not a sign of weakness. If you're struggling, and I think for me, if you have the courage to be open and honest about it, that's actually a sign of strength.
Yeah,
it's not easy
absolutely.
to say, especially when you're somebody who, like me, is quite proud, likes to like do everything well, and I don't particularly enjoy it when things don't go to plan, or I don't execute things as well as I feel I should. You know, I think it's really important that we're very honest about it. And I think it's very important that people in leadership roles and roles of influence are honest about their mental health. Because I think for too long, you know, we have been, and I've been guilty of this myself, you know, we've been encouraged to be like, just focus on the good, or, you know,
100%.
Like one of the things that I used to do, which I realize now is really toxic, was, you know, I used to work ridiculous hours, and you almost wore it like a badge of honor. I look back on it, and I actually realize now, actually that was really, really unhealthy, and it wasn't something to be proud of. And I'm not, you know, I'm not taking away from hard work and putting time and dedication. Obviously those things are required, but, you know, pushing yourself to the point where you're working 14, 15-hour days, is that a healthy thing? No, it isn't. And I think for me, one of the things that I think is great that has come out of the pandemic is that, like I say, people are being more open about their mental health, and they're being encouraged to be more open about their mental health. I think that's really, really important. That conversation, that's a conversation that needs to keep happening. You know, like I said, if you're physically unwell, you would go to the doctor. You know, why can't we apply that same rationale and openness and thinking to mental health? So I think for me, that's been one of the key things. It's really important that we talk about our mental health, and we understand that, like you said, in life, you know, bad things are going to happen. That's unavoidable. But, you know, it's having those coping mechanisms in place to deal with it. I think that's really, really important. But in order to get there, there needs to be that open dialogue and conversation.
Definitely. And that's, you know what, I completely agree with you. I think a really nice aspect of it has been the acceptance now of vulnerability. Like it's, I think now, if you just look at the theme of posts on things like LinkedIn, I think that's always a good kind of pulse for where professional society and professional community is at. You know, you see a lot of posts around people's challenges and difficulties. I tend to post around kind of uplifting stories, but that have the part in the middle that was really difficult, you know, with my own experience and with other people's experience as well. And I think as a leader, that's been something that's been really important for me, to become somebody who, within my organization and working with the children that I work with, becoming somebody who embraces vulnerability. Because what I find is if you're pretending to be, you know, Superman or Superwoman, you're actually projecting that message to people, and you're giving them a false expectation of themselves, which can then damage their own mental health. And the reality is, it doesn't matter who you are. Celebrities, even nowadays, you know, even people like, one of my childhood idols was Will Smith, and even now he is coming out on podcasts and talking about the struggles that he's had. You know, I think some of his struggles are probably too well documented, to be honest, but the vulnerability of people is prevalent across all different walks of life and status and all of those things. Even if you look at, you know, the Queen and the royal family now, they're being exposed for the vulnerability within their own family. And it's a good thing in my view, because I think now it allows people to judge themselves less harshly. Because I think, you know, a lot of the problems that arise in society, and we're talking about right back to the very beginning when we were talking about the systematic issues around barriers and the glass ceiling for women and people of color and LGBTQ community, all of those barriers are caused out of, in my view, kind of a fear of progress, because there's a judgmental undertone to professional life. And I think that the more we attack the root cause, which I believe is literally fear and judgment, and we embrace vulnerability, the sooner we'll get that kind of progress, and on a wider scale, see some amazing things happen. And let's not, you know, I know we've not got long, but let's not forget that we are seeing some amazing things happening already. You know, there's some really kind of huge highlights in society. If you look at, you know, Lewis Hamilton as an example of somebody who's just completely transformed the landscape in Formula One. Football players like Marcus Rashford, who have literally changed the expectations of what a young celebrity footballer could really be doing with the spare time. The response to things like the Sewell report. I'm focusing very much on BAME issues here, but you know, there's lots of examples across the board of, you know, the Me Too movement. What an amazing period of time that was when we started to see people toppling, and I believe these things come in waves. So, you know, we had the peak of the Me Too movement. It's got into a bit of a trough at the moment, but I think it'll come back even stronger. Same that happened with the Black Lives Matter movement, you know, from the advent of George Floyd. And I think a lot more awareness around the LGBTQ community and how diverse it is. And we are definitely seeing a shift in the tide, but it's important now, personally, as a professional, kind of trying to be the change that you wish to see, embracing your own vulnerability, accepting your own flaws, accepting that you're not going to win every time, and pushing to see that that positive progress and representing that for everybody.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So we've got 1 minute left. So I'm just going to round off by saying thank you so much for joining us today, Anton. I really appreciate it. It's been really
Thanks for having me.
It's been fantastic. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. So Joy will be back again next week from 12. We'll be sharing some information about who our speaker for next week this week. So thank you to everybody for joining us today, and have a fantastic rest of day, and we shall see you next week.